Hey guys, today I want to talk about setting up a palette and setting up the palette swatch card. So I have the giant Robax palette that you guys have seen before. Because I'm traveling, I'll be honest, it's a little big for the available space that I have. So I decided that maybe I wanted a smaller palette to work with, and you guys know me. I am much more of a more colors is more person. So there's a lot of reasons for that. A big one is that I don't like to mix, which is an upcoming video because, yeah, there's a lot for that one. But I just wanted to maybe give some tips or something, especially for your swatch cards, because as we all know, palettes can change over time. We think we're going to use a color and then maybe we don't use it as much as we think we will, or maybe we get another color we just like better, that kind of thing. So this is the Shinhan well, it's two palettes. So it's originally the 36 palette or 35, something like that, and then I bought the extra insert that gives you an extra 18 of them. So in total I have, what is it, like 53 colors or something like that. So honestly, this is probably the core of my colors. You know, the stuff that I'm mostly going to use. So I figure it's a good starting point. It's not a huge palette physically, but it is nice sized. But most of it is I wanted, like I said, to have the colors that I use a lot close at hand. And so I thought this would be a good starting point. And then when you sketch all this out, so when I sketched mine out, I set it up a little differently. If you look, you can see that your side wells are on the same side. I set mine up so that no matter how I turn it, when I'm looking at it, the right side up, I guess, everything is where it should be. So mine is a little mirrored, I guess. But I wanted to talk about when you set these up, because we know that some of these things are likely to change somewhere along the way. I decided to kind of go about this a little differently. I mentioned once before in my last hacks video that you can use these little cutouts and put them on. As I was playing with this idea, I also realized that taking them off and on tore the paper, and I didn't like that. So I ended up, you can probably see it's a little shiny. I ended up actually just adding a layer of clear packing tape, so that way you can move these and you can shuffle and you can change them out as need be, and you're not going to have to re-sketch this. You're not going to have to lay it out again. And that definitely helped. I just used double-sided sticky tape on the blocks of color and did it that way. I also noticed that I can use a Sharpie on this, but it does rub off. Your other option is to just use like your artist tape and write it on there, kind of like you've seen me do with my colors, period. But write it on and then put it down, and then that way you can change these around as you need to. I like a lot of colors. I very clearly lean more towards the, I guess, cool family. So most of my greens and blues and purples and stuff ended up over here for obvious reasons. My layout probably doesn't always make sense to people. I tend to separate my turquoises and aquas because I have so many of them. So they kind of have their own section in my swatching books and in my storage and stuff. So I kind of sat down with what I thought I wanted. I had some extras. I guess I should have grabbed some of these before I got started. But I had others that I thought possibly would work in there, that I might want in there, and I wasn't sure. So I just made blocks of everything, and then I just started laying it out and seeing kind of where my gaps were. I had ended up, I think it was a cobalt blue that I removed because it was very similar to the ultramarine, and just didn't feel like I needed two of them. I also had, one of my greens. I think maybe this one, the Prussian green was pretty close to the cobalt green deep, so I took it out. I'm not a huge lemon yellow fan. That's what this one is. Thought it might be worth having if there was room, but I prefer my Hansa's. I didn't end up including, I was going to include this hematite as my black, but as most of you know, I prefer the neutral tint. So I left it out. So there's just some colors that I tossed around. I don't do like a yellow ochre. I don't particularly care for yellow ochre. So I usually default to this raw sienna light instead. Now I did look at it and see on some of these earthy colors, the ones that I might be able to recreate easily being the key. I don't mind tweaking colors. I'm not keen on mixing colors, if that makes sense. So I figured on some of these, I could add a little darker color and get some of these darker browns that I needed, or I might need. I'm kind of bummed. I don't use it a lot, but the buff titanium I see pop up for a lot of people, and I kind of wanted to include it, and then I decided not to. So I don't know. There's definitely enough space on this palette. You could add some dabs on the mixing spaces and have some extra colors if you wanted to. But I also considered, because I use so much Prussian blue and Payne's gray, putting them in my circle areas. Again, I decided not to. Mostly they're a lot more shallow. In the end, I mean, I might have gained a few spaces, but I don't know that I would have gained that much paint. So I decided not to. I know a lot of people harp on natural colors, especially on your greens. I am much more of a vibrant colors, I guess. Maybe that phthalo green yellow shade isn't the absolute color of grass, but I like that bright emerald color a lot. So I guess I personally lean a little less towards natural colors and just the colors that I like. I guess a lot of that's going to depend on what you're painting to. So, you know, everybody has colors that they're drawn to. Everybody has colors they like. My three that I always have are my Prussian blue, my Payne's gray, and my neutral tint. Those are my kind of three most used colors. I am big on, I love a good purple, but I want purple. I don't always want a violet. So to me, violet is more red leaning, and purple is more, I guess, blue leaning, more what I think of as purple when somebody says it, as opposed to the violet color. And so Windsor Violet is one of my favorite purples. I like this Imperial Purple, and then even the Carbazole Violet, I like it a lot too. I did include a few violets. I just got this Mineral Violet from Holbein that I really liked. I think it was Holbein. I tried not to include any of the M-grams in here because they tend to be so wet and they do run. So I did skip those. I'm going to probably set up a palette of just the M-grams because I love those colors, but I just don't trust them in like a folding palette like this because I don't want them to run everywhere. As you can see for me, I set it up. You got kind of a violety pink into violet, and then I tried to make them flow in a way that made sense to me. And then you came across my green gold is obviously a very yellow green, and then it kind of jumps over to this. And then I consider these, I guess, more neutral colors, so they're sort of off on their own. This is the flow that made sense for me and kind of the way I set it up, but I liked the idea of adding something on my paper to make it so that swapping this stuff around was a lot easier. You could also use contact paper or laminate it. I don't know how well the Sharpie will come off on those. I didn't, of course, test it, but at that point you could just use your tape and be good. But it's, you know, setting up a palette, especially, this is hard for me because it's, in my head, I think a little more permanent. You can't just pop these colors out easily, which may be one of the reasons I like tubes a little more. My ADHD brain really struggles with the so-called permanence of putting them in a palette. I have several palettes I've never filled, I think in part because of that. So setting up a palette for me is a little bit of a challenge, and weeding through all the colors that I really like and think I want to keep can be a struggle. So like I said, when I sat down, I sort of fished out all the colors I thought I might want in there, and then started narrowing them down. And that really helped because I could really see some stuff side by side to really decide, oh, well, this one's really close to this color, so which one is going to be easier for me to manipulate, or which one of these, if I'm only going to choose one, is going to be the color that I'm actually going to go for. Most of the colors that I really like are going to be highly saturated colors. I like my colors bright, and I kind of wonder sometimes why I started with watercolor, because most people do watercolor because they like the transparency and they like the glowy and they like all that stuff. I'm kind of the one, I guess, that's forcing watercolors to be something they're not in a lot of ways. So like I said, setting this up and trying to decide what I wanted and what I would use was a little bit of a struggle, but setting it up with the squares and being able to swap them out, and even when I came down to, okay, these are the blues I'm going to use, having a way to set them up and see them kind of next to each other and figure out which order I wanted them in. This made a huge difference for me and being more comfortable, I think, setting them up. And I got to, you know, play with it and set it aside and not think about it for a little while, which I did. And just, like I said, it made it more comfortable for me doing it this way. There's some colors that are pretty similar, and that's fine. Like I said, everybody's kind of got their own colors that they lean towards. You know, I'm not a new gamboge person. It's a little too orangey for me. If I want a yellow, then I want an actual yellow. So stuff like that is very personal. I think I have one sap green. I want to say that it's a Winsor Newton. Don't hold me to that. And I truly don't like that color. But I really, really like this deep sap green from Daniel Smith. And, you know, that's something that people have to remember, that each brand, sometimes the colors are not the same. And I've talked about that before, how it may all be sap green, or I have an olive green. I can't remember which way this one went. I have both the Winsor Newton and the Daniel Smith, and one of them I didn't like at all, but I liked the other one a lot. I actually ended up sending that other green to a friend, and she really likes it. So, you know, just sometimes the brand makes a difference. So setting up your palette is very personal. You know, pick the colors that you like to use, that are fun for you, that are interesting for you. You know, if somebody says, oh, well, you have to have yellow ochre, just, no, you don't. If that's not a color you're going to use, not a color you want to deal with, then there's plenty of alternatives out there for those colors. Yes, many of these are colors I could create on my own if I was feeling froggy, but I assure you I am never feeling that froggy. So, like I said, you know, setting up a palette is very personal. Choose the colors that make you happy, the colors that you're going to use for your painting. I know if you're doing a lot of florals and stuff, then maybe you're a little more concerned about the more natural looking colors, and that's awesome. You know, whereas if you're painting fantasy scapes, then those are probably going to be less important to you, because natural colors aren't going to play as into it as just the colors that you like. So, I hope that this helped at least maybe make you think about how you're setting up, but also being able to swap it out. Like I said, adding that simple strip of packing tape made it so that I can just pull these off easily. Like I said, it's just a double-sided sticky tape, and you can put them down. I did a lot of swapping around when I first laid it out to decide which order I was going to have them in, which made sense for me. And being able to do that just made it a lot easier for me. So if you try something like this out, let me know. I'd love to hear how it went for you. I don't think I'm going to show you the actual filling of the palette. I don't know that anybody is really interested in seeing that, but I will probably get this palette filled at some point this week and give it some time to dry and then go from there. But if you are, like I said, interested in this palette, I got this one off Amazon. It's the Shinhan. Lots of space. This one lifts out, so if you want to put your main colors in here so you could carry it with or whatever, you can certainly do that. They are sold separately, so the insert is sold separately from the 35 palette itself. It does seem to close pretty tight. I don't think I'm going to have an issue with it, but after I start using it, I will let you guys know. Alright guys, so have a good one out there, and just go paint and have fun.